Welcome to the Big Idea, Big Moves podcast. I'm Jamie Allison, and this is where we talk to high performers across a number of different fields and from a bunch of different influencer areas. And so think of it as a bit of a mashup of, say, Success Magazine and Tribe of Mentors. We're trying to get some of those high performers and learn from them to find out, what they did to get to where they are, and really hone in on a couple of kind of key things that they do really, really well. So we're going to be doing that and continuing that today. One thing I wanted to do at the start, like we do in a lot of our episodes, is that we've asked everybody, if you haven't already done it, make sure you subscribe. So go on there, hit the subscribe button, either on our website, which is www.bigideabigmoves.com, or you can go onto any kind of podcast platform that you're on and make sure you do that and leave a review. So one review that we had recently on iTunes came from Mindful Me 123. Just wanted to kind of highlight that one because they had highlighted it saying powerful storytelling. Basically, I'll just read it out. Really great conversation and insights. Courage is something you hear a lot about, but not everyone has the power to be courageous. I learned a lot from Jamie and Amy, and that's Amy Perkins, which if you haven't had an opportunity to do that, check into it, about how to live an authentic life and be true to yourself. So thanks to them, and please make sure that you keep listening, and if you haven't reviewed it, do that. A couple of things just to get out of the way before we jump into our episode today is that we're going to tell you about Humber River Hospital here in Toronto. They're a community hospital, and they're in kind of northwest Toronto, if you're from this community. They're about 1,000-bed hospital, and their new command center that monitors patient data basically has them at the leading edge of healthcare. So if you're a nurse, if you are an occupational therapist, anybody kind of in those areas, or a technologist area, make sure you check out their website. It's hrh.ca, and they'd love to kind of have you come on board. Also, if you're looking to transform your human resources or how you find talent, check out Epitome HR, and that's www.epitomyhr.com. Hit 2020 running and make sure that you kind of jump in there, because we've got a couple of things on that site. One, you'll see that there is a transformation process chart that you can kind of take a look at, and we're going to link that to the podcast as well, so you'll be able to access that. So we are really, really happy to have somebody with us today that has a lot of people will kind of recognize, I think, for some of the work that he's done before. But Jake Gold is one of those high performers that we look at on this podcast all the time. And he's the president and CEO of the Management Trust. He's, I would say, pretty legendary. A lot of people know him from a few things, not the least of which is being able to find really good talent. And one of those that you may know about is the Tragically Hip, and took them from a small pub band to what I say is probably icon status in Canada, and around the world in a lot of areas as well. He has been, his company's been awarded Music Manager of the Year 3 times. And you may know his face from Canadian Idol. He was on that for that run, and made him a bit of a celebrity from that standpoint as well. And I think what we're going to really jump into today is his talent at being able to find people, and that's the thing that I think, regardless of industry, it's really interesting to be able to find out how people see that talent and move forward with it. One thing that I noticed, I mean, it's cold. It's kind of it's almost kind of holiday time, and one thing I found really different, is a bit of a departure, is that I know that I think your group has Fashion Santa as one of your people. That's a bit of a departure, I think, but where did that come from?
Well, stars are stars.
True.
So you said it off the top about managing talent, and Paul Mason, who is Fashion Santa, who developed the brand, trademarked the brand, is a superstar model.
Yeah,
that's what he is, and he's definitely a star, and he's no different than other stars in terms of his talent. He's just talented at different things. I work with authors as well, And
Yeah.
there are certain ones you just know are stars, and certain ones just aren't. And it's the idea of finding talent that could potentially be successful,
Yeah.
boils down to one thing. And people always say to me, well, what do you do? And I say, well, really what I do is I spot charisma.
Right. Right. So, and I guess that's it.
People
is
who
it a
can
gut
move
feel
people.
with people? Like, how do you
For me,
gauge
it
that?
is.
Yeah.
For me, it is. I'm not always right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes it's just me telling me I like it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, oh, this thing can move people. In the case of Paul, Fashion Santa,
Yeah.
he has his heart in the right place. His thing's always about giving back. So, and no matter what activation we do with whatever brand we work with, there's always a charity component to it. And his goal is he wants to have one of the biggest Christmas fashion brands in the world.
Yeah.
And be worldwide.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of thinking. I like people who are ambitious.
Yeah.
Because then I don't have to motivate them. In a lot of ways, they push me,
Yeah.
which is great too. And those are the kind of people you want to work with that have ambition.
So, okay, that leads me to let's rewind, I guess, to where kind of where you started and where that kind of big piece went. You were kind of one of those people who found the Hip, which is one of those bands that's just, as I said, I think iconic. How did you know, or did you know that where they were going to go? Like
Instantly.
Yeah.
I've told this story upteenth amount of times.
Yeah.
I'd been a manager since '81.
Yep.
So I'm actually I think I'm entering my 40th year.
Yeah.
And I started a new company with a partner named Alan Gregg in 1986.
Yep.
And in August of '86, we got sent a cassette tape. And we listened to it, and we said, let's set up a gig to see them.
Yeah.
And a week later, we set up a gig at a place called Larry's Hideaway, which was in a building at Jarvis and Carlton, which is no longer there. Yeah. That building was torn down. And they came and played, and 30 seconds into the first song, I looked at Alan, I said, we're signing these guys tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. You just knew.
You just knew.
Yeah. They had, well, was it presence? Was it
Gord Downey was
yeah.
It was
it's
electric.
beyond anything, right?
Electric.
So
yeah.
Well,
and so did the crowd.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the other things
reaction.
when I go to see bands is I look around the room, and he hit the stage, opened his mouth, and the place, you could just feel it. You just knew that we were witnessing something like historic and special.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, I had managed other acts up until that point, and I thought I knew what greatness was until I saw him.
Yeah.
And then I realized, oh, this is the bar.
And
so the bar was set at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. You just suddenly moved it. And have you seen it again at that level?
I think I thought I have, and I have seen elements of it. But that is a whole other level.
The package is completely
different. I mean, the way they play together and Gord up front, and it's so unique and different. They're really, the four guys are really a straight ahead kind of rock and roll band.
Yeah.
And then you have this, enigmatic singer who defies sort of description against a basically a straight ahead rock and roll band.
Yeah. Now you helped build their brand, because it's still even with that.
See, when it comes to art, I don't like using that word.
What how do you want to use it?
It's art.
Okay. So how did you build the recognition?
By the way, that term brand didn't even start till the
That's true.
till like the
That's
late
true.
90s, 2000. All of a sudden, it's like your personal brand and all that bullshit. And it's like it's art. It's like,
so how did you get it so that people knew about them? Because that's a chunk of your role, right?
There was a lot of strategy that went into it, to the extent of, we recognized what we had.
Yeah.
We also recognized that it wasn't for everybody.
Yeah.
At the beginning, and we knew that it had to be built from inside, not from outside.
Right. Right.
Right. So it was like, 200 gigs a year, 250 gigs a year, like real grassroots stuff, because we knew at the beginning it wasn't a radio band.
Well, and that's what's, I think, even that much more impactful about them, is that they were built off of their stage presence, more so than anything today. I would say.
No, but there are still bands trying to do it today that way. Where the market has changed, and we can get into that part of it, but where the market has changed is that now the barrier to entry is not nearly the same as it used to be. But it used to be, it was $200 for a reel of 2-inch tape just to record.
Right.
Now bands are making records for that, and in a moment's notice, it's up on Spotify and Apple Music and everything through an aggregator. So the barrier to distribution and access to the marketplace is not the same as it used to be. The difference is that, or not the difference, what still remains the same is you still have to be really great.
Yeah.
So in fact, because the barriers have come down, it's allowed for a lot of crap.
Yeah.
And it's allowed for a lot of clutter.
Yep.
So now you still have to go fan by fan, unless you have a hit song. If you're in the pop world and you have a hit song, then hit songs change all the rules.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're going to have, also if you're going to have a long-lasting career, especially as a rock band, it's I always like to say it's basic physics. The angle of incidence is equal to the angle of refraction.
Okay. So it's get out there and do it.
Right? But you understand what I'm saying?
Well,
when
I think so.
That?
I know. Well,
okay, so if you take that physics statement, and it was an experiment we did in like junior high school, where you shined a light on a mirror, and if you shined it straight up at the mirror, the reflection came straight back down.
Yep.
So if your career path is straight up, it could potentially be straight back down. If your career path is on a 45-degree angle, then the reflection will be the same.
So it's kind of the one-hit wonder versus the extended career.
Exactly.
So
now, what's different today, I think, about that is that if you're a pop act and you have a hit song, if you continue to have hit songs, then you will stay up there.
Yeah.
But you're still dependent on that hit song.
Yeah. Because that's what you're known for. That's your whole guidepost is that one song.
Right.
Right.
Or the next song, or the next song, or the next song. But you have to continue to put out those kinds of songs. So, our goal was always, we want people to buy the records before they heard them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting, because that's usually you're probably in a pub somewhere and you hear somebody, or you're in a small venue, and that's where you start to connect with somebody, and then you're following them.
Right.
And that's how. Okay.
Right. So that's what you want. You want to build a constituency that is basically trusting you to deliver the goods each time.
Yeah.
And they will judge you differently because they already like you.
Yeah.
So it's like when I was growing up listening to music, there were certain bands like, Genesis and Yes, when they would put a new record, I would just go get it.
Yeah.
I didn't have to hear it first.
Yeah.
I would go get it, and then I would put it on and I'd make my own judgment at that point. But I didn't like them any less because it wasn't this, or it wasn't what it was before. I would judge them for where they were at in their career at that point.
So you could make the argument that it's not a lot different, where everybody is still pushing for community building and things like, and it might just be how it happens differently in different, not necessarily just music, but in business. Everybody's saying let's try to kind of build a community where people, you get that kind of connection.
It's no different than politics either.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's definitely building a community. And now everyone has terms for it all.
Yeah. And a brand.
Right. Everybody has terms now for that stuff. So to my point, it was, the strategy was a fan-first strategy.
Right.
And that's kind of been my thing.
Yeah.
Fan first strategy. Over service the completists.
Yeah. So now that you were talking about the kind of barriers to entry are lower, and it means there's so much out there right now.
Right.
The same as, again, it's the same in other industries right now. One of the things that has changed is not just the technology of how that happens,
Right.
but I had actually read, I think it was a Financial Times article that said they called it music's Moneyball moment, where people were talking about the influence of using data and using analytics the same ways you get in a lot of areas in business, but that they were saying that, you know, today's manager has to be both artistic and analytic. And what are your thoughts on that, considering kind of, you know?
But we were always like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That maybe for
you didn't
the
just aggregate a whole bunch of data, but you were getting data.
Yeah, I mean, our data wasn't necessarily coming to us in the same way it is today.
Yeah.
But we were still doing analysis of, you know, where our markets were and where it was strong. And, you know, we had previous history. We had we had knowledge of, you know, when you think about it, if you're getting your record played on 10 radio stations, and you're not getting played in Halifax, you probably aren't going to sell as many tickets in Halifax than you are in the markets where you are getting radio play.
Yeah.
This was back then. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So that's data.
Same decision points.
Right. It's just how you're getting the information. So now I can look at a streaming platform and I can look at all the data and see where the pockets are, where the fans are. Right. And you know, the agent for the group and I will look at that stuff and go, okay, well, we seem to have some good pockets in the Northeast or the Midwest or, you know, in the US and stuff like that, or, you know, across the prairies. I mean, you know, for what it's worth, when we were first put out the first Up to Here, the first full-length hip record, it broke out of Calgary.
Oh, really?
Like that's where the sales really started to bubble up. Right? Where most people thought it would have been Toronto.
Yeah.
But it actually started to really break out of Calgary.
Really?
But it wasn't Edmonton, it was Calgary. Right? So it wasn't the whole province. It was like that's where we saw the big sort of
traction start
to happen was Calgary. But we could do that by just monitoring, you know, record stores.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all that data points were there. They were just there in different ways.
Makes sense. Now,
you know, promoters for many years would call the local record store.
Yeah.
Whenever an agent would pitch them an act that they didn't know enough about or anything, or especially if it wasn't getting played on the radio.
Yeah.
They would call the local record store and go, you know, are you selling any of these records? Like what's happening in you know, and they would get the information from the local record store.
Yeah. Well, it's probably it says more than just numbers anymore too, right? You probably actually get insights and everything else.
Well,
the type of people and
you know, and there's an argument that says, you know, because someone streamed a song, doesn't necessarily mean they're fans.
Well, and bot streams and everything else,
right?
Now too,
and,
right?
And if you go on to Spotify, there's one section where you can actually follow the group.
Yeah,
that information's become way more important than the streams, because you can get on a playlist that has 2 million subscribers to the playlist.
Yeah.
And you all of a sudden can have 2 million plays on a song.
But have you built that community?
But you haven't built any community, correct.
Right.
So back again to that, you know, to that community side of things.
Yeah. Now, moving ahead in your career a little bit, jumping to the Canadian Idol piece, how was, I mean, again, it's that we've talked about how you found talent, how you did that. How different was that when it's a bit of a, was it a little bit manufactured, and how is that different than other kind of things? A lot of people actually listening here probably don't know. People like Jacob Hoggard was from Hedley was one of those people.
Carly Rae Jepsen.
You know, there are people that were there that you know are big stars, and so you know it was. Did you find that it felt a little bit kind of different in how you found that talent and how you moved them forward?
Well, remember, it wasn't just me. There was 3 other people to make a decision on it. So, and, you know, our decisions were only made to get people to the top 20.
Yeah.
But after that, it was up to the
That's up.
public.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, we could, with our comments.
Sure, you can sway.
Well, it wasn't
maybe
sway.
not sway.
I would more say influence.
Yeah.
Like if we really liked someone and we liked what they were doing, we would praise them.
Sure.
But it was genuine.
Yep.
It wasn't like some edict down from above from the producer saying, "Okay, only positive comments about this person." That we were never ever told what to say.
Yep.
Sometimes they would say, I'd rather you didn't say that." Like if it was maybe cross the gray line of being, maybe not proper or whatever.
Yes.
Like I once got held up. I didn't get held up, but I got called out after a show for saying the word "jip."
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Which I didn't know what it referred to.
Yeah.
I was oblivious to it. And then I was like, oh, okay, I won't say it again.
Sure.
It's like
makes sense.
those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Right.
But never anything about your comments and what you, and your thoughts, I guess, behind the artist.
Yeah. So, in the case of Carly Rae, we always thought she was special.
Yeah.
Like we thought she was amazing.
Yeah.
Like, and we knew it from the beginning. In fact, interestingly enough, there's one of them, Steffi D, who's in Come From Away right now, and she's been in the Toronto cast forever, and she's an amazing performer and super talented. And she was 17 when she was on the show. It was like 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Or more, maybe 12 years ago. And her and I have remained friends. She actually lives in the apartment building right next door to me. and I saw her at Come From Away, and we were talking, and I was trying to show my girlfriend Steffi's audition.
Yeah.
And it was on YouTube. And I had forgotten that because there was 4 of us, that every day when we were doing those the first level auditions, one of us would be the tiebreaker.
Yeah.
We would take turns being the tiebreaker. And when Steffi came in, I was the tiebreaker.
Oh, really?
And it was a tie. And it was my decision that put her through.
Wow.
And
she probably remembers that more than
does,
you did.
I don't think
didn't?
she did, because I sent her the clip and I said, "You can thank me," and jokingly, and she goes, "I completely forgot that it was because of you I got through."
Yeah.
Because I could have easily went no, and she wouldn't have gone through because I was the tiebreaker, and it was a tie.
Yeah.
There were times where it was unanimous with us, and there were times where it wasn't.
Yeah.
So we had to have basically you had 2 votes that day.
Yeah.
And it carried through for the whole day.
Yeah.
So if you happen to come through and that particular
and you were the
judge,
you were out of luck.
Right?
Wow. Now,
so that's why I couch, the idea of discovering talent, with that show differently, is because it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
And there were circumstances that would, and it got to the point also when we had to pick the top 20 to go live.
Yep.
We had to represent the country. We couldn't just have 20 people from Ontario.
Yep.
Right. So there were actually some singers who maybe didn't get their shot because we had to have someone from Newfoundland and someone from the other eastern provinces and someone from Alberta, and we had to represent the country. So it became a little bit more of a casting thing. They still all had to be good.
Yeah.
And we knew we needed at least 10 great.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you get through the 10, then it was, okay, what does the distribution look like?
Right. And you had to do it. You had to represent the country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the intent behind it too, right?
Right. It's a national show.
Yep.
You can't, just have everybody from one place. But what we found over time is we knew that someone from Newfoundland, if they got in the 20, would be guaranteed to get in the 10.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Just because of the voting, like the entire rock would be voting for them.
Yes.
Makes sense.
But
I do recall that.
If you were in the 10,
Yeah.
it couldn't guarantee you a win.
Yeah.
But
it can get you through to there.
But because the 20 was, the votes were split so much more.
Yeah.
With across the way we did those shows.
Yeah.
That the Newfoundland vote could get you
gonna
to
get
the
you through.
10. So we knew whoever we were picking from Newfoundland,
Yeah,
that
is in
one
your
of
top
them
10.
was going to be top 10.
Wow. Interesting.
So but you learned that.
Yeah.
You learned things. You
Yeah,
learned.
over
I remember.
seasons, I guess,
I
right?
remember the first top 10 show we did. The guy who was the head of at the time, who was the head of Fremantle.
Yep.
Who was he was the president of Fremantle out of England, because they controlled the rights, and so because it was a franchise show, there was certain things you had to do. And him and I were talking before in the afternoon that day. We were at rehearsals and we were talking, and he says to me, he says, when you're making your predictions, for the next round, always keep in mind that if someone got kicked off, who's going to get their votes?
Oh, right. It's kind of like an election.
Like
I mean, it is an election, but it's like, everybody kind of vying for the other person's votes as they go along too, right?
Well, especially if you have multiple nominees to be a candidate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. One swings to the other. It's
like if in the case of America, right? If it's, Elizabeth Warren against and Bernie Sanders and all of those against the others. If one drops out, where are those votes going to go? What candidate? And you hear that all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. So it would always because what would happen is someone would get kicked off, and then the following week we would do the live show, and then we would do the results show, and before the results show started, off the top, they would ask us what our prediction was.
Yeah.
So it would be an informed decision,
right?
Knowing that if this kind of person got kicked off last week, there's a good chance that the person most like them would actually soar up,
right?
Even though they may have been down the week before, because they would never give us the vote totals.
Yeah.
Ever.
But you could intuitively, just from
figure
knowing
out
what happened the week before, or when the vote happened.
Right. But that also told you, like, in the case of Ryan Malcolm, who won the first season, Ryan never actually came first in any one performance.
Yeah.
But he never came last either. Right?
Yeah. So it sounds like politics.
He just sort of chugged along.
As long as you can clip along.
And I'm not saying he wasn't talented or anything.
No,
but he never actually, the other ones were killing each other, and he was just maintaining through the whole thing. He was
picking
the tortoise.
Up votes as he went.
He was the tortoise, right?
Right.
So
interesting.
So there's a data game for you.
Yeah. Well, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay,
so most people would never and that's the thing about me, is I've always had an analytical mind.
Yeah, well, that's if you're thinking through it.
Right.
It's the same thought process. It's really just what's available to you to be able to make the decision.
Right. So I've always thought that way. I've always had an analytical mind. In fact, I was on the phone yesterday with a tech company that I won't talk about, but when we were talking about what they're doing, because they're thinking about bringing me on as an advisor.
Yeah.
And I said to them, what about the data that's involved in this? Like, that's valuable asset.
Yeah.
Have you thought about how we could use the data? And these are two fairly experienced tech guys in San Francisco who that hadn't even crossed their mind.
Oh, and that's where the value is in so many places now.
Right.
Like that's what they're leveraging in so many of them now. Jake, you mentioned that your career now, I mean, you've been managing for almost 40 years.
Yeah.
So that is it's a huge chunk of work, but it's also, you've probably had to evolve what you do, how you go through things. How do you, and again, this is in your role or any other role, how do you stay relevant in something too, where it's such a changing kind of environment?
Are you talking about a young person's business, that I'm old?
Hey, I'm up there too.
No, but I think you're inferring that.
I am a little bit.
You can say it straight up. Like
it's a young person, but it also shifts, and it shifts so much.
I'm a 61-year-old millennial.
Okay, that's the.
Okay, yeah. I have a girlfriend. I don't have children.
Yeah.
Right. I live a very, very young lifestyle.
Yeah.
I I have a partner that works on Fashion Santa with me,
Yeah.
and he's 36,
Yeah.
and his name's Eric Warner, another music manager guy,
Yep.
and he commented to me about something we're using in an ad, and he thought it was a spelling mistake. And I said to him, no, it's a play on words.
Yeah.
And I literally wrote him, this morning, and I said, this is what the kids say. I said,
well, he's 36,
and I said,
you know?
I said, you're too old, man.
Yeah.
And he writes me back, that's why I have you to keep me young. And he's like almost half my age.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, I'm aware.
Yeah.
So I think relevance is how relevant you want to be.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure there are plenty of people that see me as old school and over the hill, and you know, they'd rather work with someone young or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I don't probably, I'm less likely to have the energy, just because I know how long it takes to take on a baby band.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I have an assistant who's a manager himself. I mentor him, and we've taken on a couple of young acts that he looks after, that they're not technically on our roster, but they're his, but he's partners with me on it.
Yeah.
And I'm mentoring him on the acts and everything else, because he's got the energy to do that, the baby band.
Yeah.
Plus it's time management. It's like, you know, I only have so much time. And just from a straight fiscal responsibility, I have to generate revenue for the company to keep the doors open and everything else. And if I'm spending all my time on something that isn't making any money and may not make money for 5 years, then I'm not really doing it right.
Yeah.
You know, I could do that early in my career when everything was like that.
Yeah.
But now, you know.
Well, and I would argue that brings a different level of value to your clients, right? Like that, not just your experience, but also when you are with a specific client, you're pretty darn focused on them, I would assume.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is I don't take on like 40 acts. Like that's not how I work.
Yeah.
So, because I'm very much a very hands-on manager.
Okay.
Because you know how people would always say, "Don't sweat the small stuff."
Yeah.
I say it's all about the small stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's when you have the time and are focused on it.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that probably makes the difference.
And there's a
in your
difference
industry.
between micromanaging and all about the small stuff.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Okay. So what's the difference from your end?
Well, I think that you know, when we used to send out all the newsletters for the Hip, the guy who managed that stuff for me would send them to me first.
Yeah.
And I would go through them. And I would change one word here and one word there.
But you knew what was in
one
there.
word
100%,
there and one word there. Right. Only because there's different ways to say the same thing that can elicit different responses.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's small stuff. Now, some people would say, why are you micromanaging the newsletter? And I would be, because it's all part of the messaging.
Yeah, there's a voice to it.
Right. And you have to understand that.
Yeah.
So those are those kinds of things, right? You know, spelling mistakes, you know, just stuff.
Yeah.
Just
all the
stuff
little
like
things
that
can hurt
right.
the brand. So,
for lack of a better
or the
term.
community or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Okay, so what do you have coming up in 2020? What's some of your big stuff?
Well, Commandeer's back in the studio, and we're just getting the next 5 tracks mixed, so we should have a release with them coming. The Pursuit of Happiness will probably do some festivals and that fashion.
Mo does some work with you, right? Aside from just the band work. And
in fact, that's how it started. Is I managed Mo as a record producer.
Yeah.
And then there was this kind of resurgence of people asking for the Pursuit, so we put together a 30th anniversary of Love Junk and, you know, special edition.
Cool.
And so the band gets together to play when it's called for. They're not a touring act per se. So they all have jobs. You know, Brad Barker, the bass player, is at Jazz FM, and, you know, so they all have. You know, Mo actually teaches at Fanshawe. He teaches production at Fanshawe.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so if you go to Fanshawe and learn
there you go.
record production, Mo will be your teacher. You know?
That's very cool.
Right? So, And I work with some really good producers who are composers as well. Russell Broom, who does all the music for Jan Arden's show and co-writes with her and has produced a lot of her stuff. Dan Hosh, who works with Wild Rivers, he's a producer as well and a writer. So and Lawrence Curry is also a producer, engineer, mixes a lot of records. He did all the early Sloan stuff.
Yeah.
So, plus I work with authors. I'm actually consulting an audiobook company that has, they're one of the biggest audiobook companies in Poland. Well, they're the biggest in Poland, one of the biggest in Europe.
Yeah.
And they opened up in Toronto a little over a year ago. They have studios here. And what they're doing is they're going out and licensing a lot of books that came out originally, in paper, but have never been made into audiobooks that are still popular.
Really?
So I'm bringing them titles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've already licensed in the first month or so. So I've been on and off relationship with the guy just because he licensed one of my other clients' books and did an audiobook on it.
Yeah.
And then we started this relationship where it was like, I want to do more books.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why don't I go find them for you?
Yeah.
So we've already done 20 books.
Wow.
So we haven't recorded them yet, but
but
we've done the licenses.
Them, you've got them. Yeah, I got everything.
But there's so many out there.
Yeah.
When you think about how many books have not been made into audiobooks.
Yeah.
And so he does the reads, he hires actors, or even if it's first person, they'll read it themselves if they can read. Because it's not easy. A lot of people think it's easy. It's not easy.
Yeah, no.
Right?
No.
To actually do
skill to do the actual
read.
voiceover
Yeah.
stuff. So,
yeah. So I'm doing that, I've consulted a few tech companies and
lots. So stuff all over the place now.
And I have some real estate. I have a real estate business.
Wow. So you're busy.
As
busy as you want to be.
I could always be busier.
Yeah. Well,
because I don't live to work.
Yeah.
But I'm not that person.
Yeah.
Because I choose when I take my time off.
Yeah.
I set boundaries with my clients.
Yeah.
But if I want to spend 10 hours or 12 hours or 18 hours because I'm really passionate about something I'm working on, then I will do it.
Yeah.
And if I don't, I won't.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of working for yourself.
Yeah, like having the choice.
Right.
You don't necessarily work, and that's why I say in my business it's not like I work less, but I have a little more control over my time and when.
My Uber driver was telling me the exact same thing last night. How much he likes the fact that he doesn't have a boss.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that was his favorite part of the job, that he didn't have a boss.
The only one you can complain about is yourself.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I always say I hate my job because I hate my boss.
Yeah. Okay, so the one thing we always ask every person who comes on the show is to get kind of 2 or 3 kind of quick steps, but we're gonna say it very specifically for you, for anyone out there who's having to find talent in a very general sense of the word. So it might be somebody who's trying to find it for their business, might be somebody trying to find it in the same kind of context as you. What would you say would be kind of 2 or 3 things, 2 or 3 steps to do to be able to get a little closer to that, to be able to find your way to good talent?
I'll give you an example that recently happened. Okay. My girlfriend works in my industry, and it was just by chance. She applied for a job, a bunch of different jobs, and she actually got this job. Works with one of the collective societies, and one of the people she works with, she came over. She brought her over to the house one day, and we were talking. And this woman is a local promoter of ethnic acts that are her ethnicity.
Yeah.
And I could tell from talking to her that she had her shit together.
Yeah.
Like I went, this she could be a star. She could be a star in what she does.
Yeah.
And I said to her, would you ever think about moving to the Middle East? And she said, why do you say that? And I said, because I have a friend
Yeah.
who heads up one of the biggest concert promotion companies in the world in the Middle East.
Yep.
And he recently meant to me that they're ever expanding and they're looking for more people. I said, I think he would hire you because I know I can tell. And I
Yeah.
wrote him and I said, I just found a star for you. So now they're talking.
Really?
Now, I don't know when
Wow.
they're going to
Yeah.
meet, but that was an example that I was able to recognize that this person had their shit together.
Yeah.
And that could definitely be someone that could grow and to be really successful at what she does.
And there's a part with being the connector too, right? Like it seems like, you know, you've got
I
a
knew
big
we
enough
were going to
network.
go Gladwell at some point.
Yeah, yeah, well, no, it's just, yeah. But it's true. I mean, it sounds like that's a big part of what you do as well, right? I mean, that's
no, but when I wrote him and I said, I think I found you someone really great.
Yeah.
You have to understand that I was this guy's mentor for many years.
Yeah.
So when I tell him I found someone,
He already trusts you that
that's the Maven side.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, if we want to go there. Okay.
Obviously we do.
Right. So I'm saying, like, I don't know how to tell someone where do you find them.
Yeah.
I think you have to have your eyes and ears open all the time.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of I'm going to go look for something. It's no different than, when you think about relationships, romantic relationships. It's like the ones that actually happen because no one was actually looking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like that's when it happens.
Yeah.
When there's magic and there's a spark and it's no different than anything else. So as long as you're conscious and aware, there's a good chance that you're going to come across somebody, sitting at a desk looking at resumes is not going to, although if you read Gladwell's latest book, Talking to Strangers, he diffuses all of that. He says, the arguments that he makes in that is that it's better not to meet somebody. Better to make your decision based on,
on just
on
what's on the paper.
What's on the paper, yeah. And he has all kinds of examples on how that your own biases will actually influence your decision unknowingly.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, it's the unconscious bias piece, right?
Learn biases.
That's a huge thing in recruitment. Right. People are trying to figure out, does it make sense to at least get down to a number of people through some technology or whatever.
But everybody always has to do the interview. Right?
Somebody has to, right? There's always that human component, and it's where do you bring that in, and how do you at least make sure your biases you're more aware of your biases?
Yeah, but it's subconscious. It's 90%.
People are people.
Subconscious 90%.
Yeah,
Jamie.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
ask Freud,
right?
Ask Freud, right? So, but interestingly enough, he equated it to one of the things he talked about was blind auditions for the symphony.
All right.
Where they sit behind a curtain.
Yeah.
So they're not being judged by age or gender or anything else. They're purely being judged by how they sound.
Yeah. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's a recommendation for his book. It's a good book.
No, it's anytime you can bring his stuff in is a good thing.
It's a good book. But he just points out some interesting things. It's definitely a darker book than anything he's ever written before. But he talks about that.
Yeah.
So would I have necessarily known that this person that I met was good for the job if I had only seen it on paper?
Yeah. Probably
Probably not. But the one thing I know in my business is that stars are important.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Having personality, presence,
charisma,
all of that is different. Right?
When I first started in the business in 1981, there was a guy that ran one of the biggest agencies in the country.
Yeah.
And he would always call me into his office to hang out because I used to hang out with all the agents trying to get gigs for my first band I managed and And that was my thing, hang out and hopefully, stuff will fall from the tree, right?
Yeah.
And he called me into his office one day. He goes, "You're going to be a big manager one day." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because you got personality."
Yeah. Yeah.
So he spotted it.
Yeah.
And so, back to, again, spotting charisma.
Yeah.
Whether it's in Fashion Santa or
Yeah.
Gord Downey or a talented executive.
Yeah.
All
right. All right. On that note, again, this has been a really interesting conversation, Jake. But I mean, from my end, partially because I'm a huge Hip fan, which is kind of cool too. But I mean, being able to kind of have that deeper discussion is pretty cool. So
I'm glad
thank
you
for
enjoyed
taking
it.
the time. I really appreciate it. And so everybody listening, just make sure you check out any of Jake's stuff. You'll see it all over. Do you have a website for?
Yeah, it's just mgmtrust.ca.
All right. Okay. So check that out. And again, when you go on to the podcast on any of your podcast platforms, make sure you hit subscribe. Give us a review and say kind of what you thought about Jake's stuff, and we'll make sure we connect you into an upcoming episode. And we'll see you again next time on Big Idea, Big Moves.